with the Change My View podcast. I'm Michael Hatch, Reddit username MeHatch, and we're here with Cal. Hello.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm good. So, a little of our usual intro music for consistency, but for everyone out there listening, thank you for checking in. So, a little bit of a quick housekeeping. Cal, do you want to bring up what you had said about the live OPs and who's going right now? Like for future,
Okay.
what we're looking for, live OPs?
Yeah, sure. So an idea we had, which isn't really feasible at this point, but we thought it would be really cool to maybe follow a post in real time and, analyze what's going on as the comments come in, the deltas come in potentially, and maybe even get the OP and some of the commenters in for a chat afterwards. But we think this is a future feature, really, don't we?
That's right. Yeah. So just to let everyone out there know, as we're doing this weekly, every week we're going to be looking for, even if you've only got 10 upvotes, if you are a live OP when the podcast is going out live and you want to come on and discuss sort of your impression of how it's going. Is your mind changing? Do you have any thoughts or counter arguments you want to walk through? Like, give us an X-ray into what's going on in your head as an OP, considering all these new perspectives on your point of view. We think that'd be really interesting. So we never know when it's going to happen, but we'd like anyone who's interested. You don't have to be on even the front page of the posts. Just someone who's currently actively being the OP of a live thread. We'd love to talk to you because we'd just love to see what's going on inside the head of someone potentially could be changing their mind. So yeah, so please let us know. And even if today, if you want to join, you can always come into the group chat and or hit us up via message here, and we'll try and get you in. So anything else on that, Cal, or are you good to move ahead?
No, I think you've summarized it well. Yeah.
Very cool. Okay, so we've got together here a handful of posts that Cal found that have been getting some heat this week as some of the bigger posts. And so I just want to look at a few of them and just see sort of how the threads have been going, any deltas getting out, what's happening in the discussion here this week in Changing My View. So which one do you want to start with? Cal, was there anyone in particular you want to start with?
Okay, yeah. So I thought we would start with one that's from today, currently on the front page, titled, "Emotional TV commercials do nothing in making me want to purchase the product. If anything, it deters me from buying the product." So I thought we could start with that. It's quite light.
Cool. All right. Well, let's. I'll go ahead and read the description then, if that's cool with you. And this is 7 hours ago by user Tatertoski. And Tatertoski says, "This is easier to explain with an example. There was just an extremely emotional, over-the-top commercial on TV that showed a family holding hands and laughing over Thanksgiving dinner with a narrator talking about how important family is. And at the end, it's revealed it's a Pillsbury Crescent commercial. Another example would be when the son comes home from the war early and brews a pot of coffee, Folgers coffee, and then embraces his mom, both of them crying. Commercials like this drive me crazy because I do not think they do absolutely anything in making me want to buy the product. I'm never going to purchase Folgers coffee again. I'm seeking an emotional moment with my family. Same applies for Pillsbury Crescent rolls. It feels so tacky and cheesy that they're almost hard to watch. Well, except for that time-lapse rising. But anyways, I just don't understand how people can be sitting around a table in an advertising company and come to the consensus that these types of commercials will sell products. Also, in a weird way, these types of commercials feel patronizing. Like, oh, thanks, Folgers. You really think this is going to work on me, and really irritate me. Basically, I can't stand them. They have absolutely zero influence over me as a consumer." So, yeah, there we have it.
Yes. So interesting. I have to agree. This has happened to me a few times. Especially in the run-up to Christmas. In the UK, we have a yearly John Lewis advert whose main goal seems to be to make its audience cry. A really emotional advert that pulls your heartstrings, and the amount of times I've heard people say they've cried at the John Lewis advert, and I do wonder myself
And just
why
I'm
that's
not.
a goal.
Is this a local celebrity or brand?
Yeah, John
John
Lewis.
Lewis.
Yeah, sorry. It's a huge chain of stores in the UK. It kind
How's
of
it
just
spelled?
sells everything.
Oh, okay. So kind of like a CVS or a Walgreens here, similar.
Well, it sells like home stuff and clothes and all that.
Okay.
You know, there's no food or anything, I think. But yeah, no,
Oh,
they have a yearly Christmas advert, and it's a big deal. You know, people are looking forward to it in a weird way, and it's it's a talking point, and it's definitely relevant to this thread. It's considered an emotional TV commercial. So, and I have to agree with the OP. I generally find it an odd thing. So I'll be interested to see how this discussion went down.
yeah. I mean, just as someone who we okay, so like I just noticed when I turned on YouTube today um to start this process to do our video live streaming event. I saw an ad pop up that had just been filmed here at Thunder a few days ago, and it's one of these Gap ads, and everyone's got sweaters on, and it's all very crisp shot and nice to look at. And I haven't even watched the thing yet with sound, but that's music. It's probably like got a little upbeat feel, and Gap doing their brand thing. But when I think of emotional commercials, I'm thinking about the LBJ commercial with the atom bomb and the little girl, or you think of the crying Indian, who the actor turned out to be Italian, I think, the crying Native American. Is it effective? I think a lot of brand loyalty is sort of solidified kind of by one's early 20s in a lot of sense. I wonder if maybe anyone a little older than that, they're already past the window of that target audience, and perhaps in that audience it's more effective. Or maybe the types of brands, like people who organize Thanksgiving dinners, might be more susceptible to that than perhaps OP, if OP's more maybe of a guest at Thanksgiving dinner rather than the organizer, or the mom there doing the thing. So I guess it's a lot of, the one thing that comes to mind is that a lot of them aren't for me. Like it's I guess I would suggest, as a response to OP, I'd suggest, well, the commercials, if it's not working on you, you're just not the target audience. Like, it's not for you. They didn't have you in mind. But I don't know. Just my initial thoughts, but let's see what happened.
Sure.
I haven't been in the yet. Have you read through it at all?
Yeah, so the top comment by Palaces of Paragraphs, it touches on what you just said there about how it clearly doesn't work for the OP because you are actively annoyed by these types of commercials. So you associate that negative feeling with the product. But for most people, emotional commercials aren't annoying. They're just fine. So, yeah, I mean, okay, most people don't find it
Well,
annoying. That's probably true, isn't it?
yeah, I think there's a schmaltzy aspect that I think he finds annoying. A lot of times it'll lack irony, or they just go straight hit at the emotion, and without your standard 2 hours to tell a story or whatever to get you on board with the protagonist. They're trying to get an emotional hit in 30 seconds. I mean, that's an incredibly difficult thing to do. It's almost like critiquing Neil Armstrong for flubbing the landing on the moon line. It's like the dude was on the moon. Like, I've done a little bit of consulting work to help with some commercial writing, and it's surprisingly difficult because you're trying to do something new, like not hit a cliche, but a lot of times the cliches are there because they work, and it's but this, I don't know, there's something of that schmaltziness that does ring hollow. Like, how can people possibly get into this? Some people do.
And not to get too tangential, but I do find quite often these adverts can be quite long-winded and completely irrelevant to the product that they're selling. Like I think OP mentioned a similar thing above. And it's I read once that sometimes what happens is a production company or an animation studio will make a short animation, and they'll basically put it up for bidding, and various companies bid on who gets it, and then they get to stick their name at the end of the advert. So that's interesting to me, because in a sense they're not advertising anything apart from their brand. But
right. Well, and that is just building brand consistency. Like Geico, like it tells me nothing about their insurance. But I have a warm feeling towards them because they run a line of very funny commercials and have been doing it for 20 years or something. I don't have Geico insurance because I just shopped around and went with someone who had comparable insurance for less. But I feel good about their brand. Some of it sometimes isn't like that one commercial is what changes your mind, but it's like over time creating a background noise of seeing enough Coca-Cola stuff that, okay, I know that brand is real and out there and a big deal and a constant presence, I guess, in the commercial market. But I don't know. There's probably a lot of sophisticated research going into a lot of it that we're not privy to. You probably have to pay just to get the info on, but it'll be interesting to see what they back and forth this year. I think we do see a delta, right?
Yeah. So I'll continue I started reading a comment before we.
Oh, right.
So I'll just continue. So Palace's paragraph goes on to say that the goal of the company is for the consumer to subconsciously associate positive feelings, happiness, family, etc. with the product. This isn't as cut and dry and logical as, oh, Folgers coffee brings families together, I better buy some. It's just that when you're shopping for coffee and see Folgers among the options, they want you to be familiar with the brand and have a generally positive opinion on it. So, and they say a lot of it is simply exposure, which is what we were just talking about there, wasn't it? So it's the brand really that they're trying to get out, and they're trying to associate your feelings with that brand as opposed to actually advertising anything. And they're going to say, sorry?
Go ahead. You're good.
Yeah, so they go on to say, you're more likely to buy a product you're familiar with than one you aren't. Folgers wants to make sure you recognize the Folgers label. It may be irrational since you don't necessarily know more about Folgers than about whatever's next to it on the shelf. But as long as you feel like you do, you'll choose it over the other options. And they don't expect you to necessarily even remember the commercial about the son and his mum. They only hope that having seen the commercial will mean that when you see the Folgers can on the shelf, it triggers a positive response in you. This doesn't work for you because you do remember the commercial specifically because you had a negative reaction to it. But it does work decently well for most people, which is why companies keep doing it. So, yeah, good comment.
And this is great because the way OP has gives away a delta right off the bat. So this is the top response here to Palace's paragraphs by OP Tartarovsky here, and they go on to say, delta, I guess that's fair. I mean, if it didn't work, they wouldn't do it. It just seems absurd to me that this would work, especially because sometimes commercials really do have a narrative that says Cheerios makes homes happy. Still seems incredibly patronizing, but I guess there are people out there who get the warm and fuzzies from that. ... So a reluctant delta, I guess, in a way.
Yeah, and it's one of those deltas where, it's not really changed the view in the sense that the view was, as the title states, that emotional TV commercials do nothing in making OP want to purchase a product. So, in a sense, that hasn't been changed at all because they're referring to the fact it works on other people. It's not like it's suddenly going to work on OP now. But nevertheless, the delta was given, recognizing that there's a reason they do it, because clearly OP was annoyed that they do it, but now perhaps appreciates why.
Yeah, it's like Michael Bay. If it works on the humans, what are you going to argue with?
Yeah,
it may not work on Tartarovsky, but let's say a enthusiast for repairing VX machines, then if they've got an ad itemizing and listing down the upgrade variant analysis for TR23 filters, then you'll see the logical reasons why you have to do that to prevent overheating in the surrounding module. So by the way, check out VX Junkies. It's a great subreddit for people with the specialties. So he may he may just be a very logical person who just, works in a field where I need the data. I need the, um, and I mean, there are people who can hit both. Like, you remember that Dollar Shave Club commercial a while back that just blew up? Probably 5 years ago now.
I don't think
Guys
I would
on
have seen it.
okay, it's one of the first viral commercials, but now they're like this huge successful company. And this guy who had, maybe had a handful of employees selling these razors, they made this fantastic video that went viral, just selling the product. But it was fun, made you feel good, but also explained the product very well. And a lot of times you'll just see a BMW pull up with a ribbon on top of it, and you're like, this tells me nothing about the car. But for some people, it puts them, it works. But I think the best example of this ever, though, is there's a fantastic IKEA commercial with a lamp. And I will find the link later, but it has a little fun with this whole issue of the emotional commercials. I'll put the link in show notes. But IKEA lamp, if you're listening live and want to check it out, worth your time. Short IKEA commercial. Do you want to dig in any more on this, or head up to the next topic?
Well, I was just going to say that I can appreciate that these kind of warm, fuzzy commercials with the mom embracing the son, I can see how that works. But what I do find really interesting is in the case of the UK, these John Lewis adverts, who clearly have succeeded since we're talking about it right now. But the advert has that effect on people that it makes them cry. And I wonder if that's like necessarily a good thing. I mean, it's a good thing because they've reached the point now where people get excited for the next John Lewis advert. Like they say to, I've heard people say, have you seen the new John Lewis advert yet? And that's such a weird thing to say, isn't it? Like, does anyone say that about any other adverts? So they've clearly succeeded, and like the commenter mentioned, there's a reason why they do it. But I do find that interesting, that kind of the reaction of crying, having that association with your brand. I mean, these adverts, they're very emotional. I mean, last year, I think what they did was it was an advert about this young child was opening their Christmas presents, and I think they got a telescope, and they looked out at the moon, and their grandfather was on the moon waving back at her, and clearly they were implying that the granddad had recently died, and he was still involved in Christmas. He was like sat on the moon with his own like party hat on.
Oh,
and sorry?
Oh, that's sweet.
Yeah, it's sweet, but do you not think that maybe it's just me, but I just find that really sad. I mean, that just made me sad.
Well, I think I don't know. It sounded kind of a little bit touching but it has combines the sort of scienciness of the telescope with a little bit of the some religiosity of the afterlifeness. I don't know.
Yeah, so it definitely touched me. Like I'm as a story, I found it moving. Like
the
point where even I was like feeling a bit like emotional watching it. But it's this weird thing. Like, what does that association do for me? Does that kind of emotional response and John Lewis, what does it do for me? Well, nothing apart from makes me talk about it with people.
And all the free talk we're giving them about it right now.
Yeah, so so their aim clearly isn't to get people into the shop to feel that feeling, but so that people will talk about, have you seen the latest emotional advert? Anyway.
Yeah, no, man, it's got to be a hard thing to do, though. A lot of whiteboards go down finding that space. Well, you want to I forgot something in the housekeeping as far as the feedback. Do you want to get into that a little bit before the next post?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, go ahead.
So just wanted to give a thank you to user Jonta, who took a long time to write out really a full treatise here of bullet points and suggestions for improvement with a little bit of attitude and cheekiness with it. So all taken well, and we appreciate all of the feedback. So we went through it before the episode and actually made a few adjustments here with some of the sound, and are just to you and anyone else who has any further feedback for the show, we really do appreciate it. Want to continue to try and make the user experience as good as we can. So do you have anything else to add to that, Cal? Cal, do you have anything?
Sorry. Yeah, no, I was just replying to. I'd muted myself. I was replying to an OP who had been messaging about getting on live. So potentially that's going to happen.
Okay, I'll leave you to that. While you're doing that, I'll read just a couple of the feedback points then, if that's cool.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing Jonta said, do you do voice warm-ups? It appears that I'm using my modal voice. So I'm going to have to look up what that means, Jonta, but it'll be today I learned, hopefully, about what a modal voice is. Start is silent, so we went right in today. And we're going to try and just keep kind of tight on each other to keep these gaps eliminated without stepping on each other too much. So it's just something we're going to have to keep getting better at. And for those wondering, and Seuss we talked about is another moderator who does actually a ton of the moderating these days. And very, very welcome addition to the team, I think almost 2 years ago now. And Peter, the unpronounceable, is username HUADPE, for those wondering. That seems to be an open-ended question too. So we're eliminating keyboard and mouse clicking, trying to mute more as well. There's some multitasking here. And anyways, please
I just thought I'd jump in and say, for anyone that listened to the last episode, apologies for my murdering of the word dichotomy. It's funny. It's one of those things. I honestly, hand on heart, I've never said the word in my life, but I've read it many times, and for some reason, I didn't know how to pronounce it. I should be familiar with that word, in the subreddit, but
I am familiar with dichotomy, and I happen to have heard it first before reading it. But for 10 years old, I always loved old architecture, and I had only read this word that I had also heard the pronounced version separately, but never put the two together. So I thought that, like, this Roman temple has a very nice facade, but it was facade. And I knew what facade meant in terms of a human putting up a facade. And I knew that the facade was the part of the building, but I was pronouncing it wrong the whole time because I'd only read it in these books. So yes, I have, I'm sure, one of many more of those as well, when you read a word and don't hear it.
yeah. But yeah, just thought I'd mention that.
That's great. Okay, so yeah, I'm sure there'll be more from everyone in the future here. All right, so that's kind of it for the feedback part here. And we've got a couple more of these more heavier posts before getting into the light posts towards the end. Anything you want to hit on next, Cal? Any preference?
So yeah, I'm just speaking to an OP just now who, for a post that I was hoping to talk about today, and so that might tie in well at the end. Luckily, we hadn't started it yet, so instead, we should go on to another post from yesterday titled "Change My View. It's dumb to form an opinion if you don't know enough about that subject." Relevant to the subreddit, and I think it'll be interesting.
So at first, I'd just like to know as to OP's experience and expertise and research on whether or not it is dumb to form an opinion if you don't know enough about the topic. Has he done his due diligence?
So, to be honest, the post itself doesn't detail too much, but gives an example about a movie, which is interesting because my thought when I read this title was it's going to be about, I don't know, maybe climate change or something really quite scientific. But their example is interesting. So just to sum up their post, they said, in their words, I find very stupid of people with little to none information. I think that's not my typo. About something, creating their own thoughts about something that they are not necessarily right. not exactly the best example I could think of, but here it is. So this is the example I mentioned. Person A watched a 2-hour movie and loved it. Now he wants to show it to person B, but person B just watched 15 minutes of it and hated it. Now person B thinks that the movie sucks and thinks he's right about that. Assuming the first 15 minutes were indeed boring and person B would actually enjoy it if he stayed until the end, he is objectively wrong and is making a fool of himself trying to convince person A that the movie is bad. So
yeah, you think it would be
I imagine
epistemology or faith or global warming or something heavy, but this is sort of just a movie, you know, keeping it simple, keeping it non-controversial. Do you think that's a good tactic as an OP to pick an example that perhaps is less explosive?
Yeah, you know, I actually
have the discussion.
I actually think, yeah, it's a smart move, because if they did bring up an example that was quite heavy or, you know, commonly talked about in the subreddit itself, perhaps the discussion would delve more into that topic. Whereas I don't know if it was deliberate, but OP's approach of you know, a light, simple example is quite a smart move in this. And if they genuinely want to talk about the meta aspects of forming an opinion when you don't know enough about the subject.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it keeps you from caught in the mud there, but without so dehumanizing it that we're looking at some kind of like symbolic logical formulas where it's just like, yeah, I'm interested to see. Do you know if OP has a delta on this?
No deltas.
Now.
No deltas given on this post.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I guess if given the topic, right, it might be hard to crack him or her. But the top response here, I'll read that just because you know, this is the voice of the people here decided this is the one that's deserved the most attention, so we'll read it. This is from username Feathering, like feet ring, but I think it's like feathering without the E in the middle. Or the second E. Anyways, this is what they said. 336 upvotes. What is the limit before you know enough to argue? Question mark. Someone had a very similar thing a few days ago. If I'm going to have an opinion, do I need to know every merit of something? Say taxes. I should probably look to the fiscal benefits of taxes as it's the most common. But do I need to research the moral issues of taxes? What if there's a religious reason? And then we have a response from OP, which is kind of you now.
Oh, sorry. Yep. No, I was just replying again to that. This is the difficulties of live. I'm trying to communicate with the other OP.
Getting with the so I'll just charge forward here, and I'll just read the one reply from OP, replying OP named Goings, Goings. I like that one word name. And they say, not really a limit to how much you need to know about it, but how much you know in relation to the other person. Even though the other person that knows more about it than me could make logical mistakes, I feel that I am disrespecting the other person. I'm not sure I get that right away. Not really much more. Okay, so I think they're saying that as long as you can, legitimately say you're in a position to be more of an expert than the person you're talking to give the opinion without having that authority or expertise is actually disrespecting the other person, I guess, i.e. either wasting their time or being willing to give them a false impression of your expertise. So that's a fair point by OP in general sense. But I mean, yeah, I think it's one of those funny things that falls into the category of adaptive but awkward in a modern world, like making type 1 errors. This idea that if you think you hear rustle in the woods and you think it's a tiger and you're wrong 99 times out of 100, it's worth it for the one time you were right. That's type 1 error, but it's adaptive for humans evolving. But then now we get into a modern age, to jump ahead, like to have some kind of quick thinking, form an opinion with not full information using a heuristic like this, I think could be adaptive in that more tribal evolved setting. But now we can really flesh out and sit and calmly and think it all out and through and research it. It seems like it's amateurish, but perhaps adapted at an earlier time, huh?
Mm-hmm. Well, what I find interesting about this is it's almost impossible to address in a true democracy, um, in the sense that it's funny how, you know, you have to admit on one hand that sometimes the best decision would be made by a small group of people who know more about the subject than if it was put to a large vote. Yet it seems that generally you know, it can be difficult to, like, for instance, the whole Brexit thing in my country. I don't think any of us can, well, many of us can claim to really understand the economics of the whole situation and the benefits of either option. Yet we were given the choice, and it's this interesting thing. I'm, you know, not to make an opinion on it, but on one hand, you can boil down the decision to, you know, what feels right. So a lot of people were saying, I don't really need to know much about it. All I need to know is that it feels right to be in control of our own situation. Yet other people were saying, well, you know, that's not a good enough reason. There's advantages to staying in, etc. So I do think it was, you know, it was an example of where people were given an important decision without necessarily knowing anything about the outcomes. And so, but, you know, not to say that necessarily it would have been better to put it in the hands of anyone else, because it's at least seems recently that they equally don't know what they're doing. You know, the people negotiating.
Yeah, yeah, and I think there's something too where this, you know, it touches on those advertisements a little bit, you know, and that idea that a lot of our decisions, whether we like to think so or not, aren't always made consciously or logically, but often emotionally beneath the surface, and we tell the narrative later of how we came up with it. So with the advertising, you know, okay, it feels better. I feel better about you know, for this, you know, for Brexit. Do I feel good about Brexit? Do I feel my tribe of the United Kingdom needs to, you know, go its own way on this? And I just generally have a feeling that overall I don't like the control from on the continent. And you know, is there an argument to be made that the guts of a lot of people working together actually is some kind of useful information about day-to-day living, and you know, are our feelings useful in that way as information, even if we don't be perhaps not slave to them, but see them as useful, as informative of what something's gone too far one way or another, you know, like, yeah, it's complicated.
Yeah, because also at the same time, it's this interesting question. It's easier to boil it down to a smaller community to appreciate, but it's this interesting thing of, if you let everyone collectively make a decision, even if it's the wrong decision, perhaps in the long run, the benefits of allowing that group to collectively make a decision outweigh the benefits of having made the right decision by a few people, given that in the future those same few people might make the wrong decision that could be, you know, even more disastrous, and it gets
The
turns
better to
into
be the wrong way than the right decision the wrong way.
mm,
Oh, okay, that's a good way of, yeah. Yeah, it's, though I do think in 15 minutes you can get a pretty good sense if it's going to be a good movie. Like I think, I think that is a well-informed opinion. I think you have like 95% of the information you need at that point.
yeah.
Like if you leave before the first word of spoken dialogue, that's one thing. But you know, bad movies, it's gonna be bad from the start usually.
I mean, have you ever been gripped by a book from the first page, like genuinely?
Oh, Da Vinci Code,
Really? Yeah,
Animal
yeah.
Farm. Just trying to think of the ones that pop right into mind. Hero of a Thousand Faces. It's Joseph Campbell's the hero cycle monomyth. Uh, the Star Wars. Um, I would say there are two screenplays I read that stand alone as their own piece of art are just incredible, gripping. One was for the movie Speed. It's Keanu Reeves from the 90s. That screenplay by itself is an absolute work of art, even before they made the movie. And one other was of a movie by John Spates, screenplay by John Spates, which never been produced, but I used to work in a development office where it came across my desk, called Shadow 19. Probably the best script I've ever read, that or Speed. But both of those just grabbed you so well. Yeah, those are the ones that come to mind. But you, any favorites of yours that grabbed you right away?
No, so that's what I was about to say. In general, I don't know, maybe if I've, been unlucky, but I think, to be honest, I think it's more of my issue where I really have to power through the first chapter. I really got to stick with it, and then once I'm hooked, then I really am hooked, and I will keep reading and reading and reading. But it's almost like slight attention deficit. Unless I'm really, really, really into it.
Like you want to get into that, like you're forming the perfect situation to earn your way into the space where you can really feel it and get into it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But anyway, that's kind of a tangent. But I was going to say, actually, I don't know at which point I was going to mention this. I just received a book in the post yesterday, actually. And it's a book called Being Wrong by Catherine Scholes, who this book was brought up in early talks of Change My View, and was partly what inspired the Delta system, because I haven't read it yet, but apparently she talks about how when we change our view, quite often we don't acknowledge that we've changed our opinion, and we just kind of absorb it and carry on as if that's always how we felt. So that's what those talks kind of inspired the Delta system. So I thought it's about time I get that book.
Oh, okay. That's cool. So that leads sort of you might have heard something back in the day related to that, or someone commenting on it that inspired you to get this whole project up and running. And now you finally want to get back around to reading it, the actual book. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess this kind of links in a little bit to the next post we're talking about, writings of professors.
Great. Okay.
Do you like that link?
Yeah, that's very smooth. You want to read it, or shall I?
So can you read it? I'm just going to message the OP quickly.
Yeah. So this was submitted 4 days ago by username jmiller979, JMILLER 979. Get 300. And here the title is as follows: Change My View. Professors should not be able to teach exclusively or mainly from their own writings. And it's a short post, so we'll read the text. And OP says, I understand that teachers that do this are usually very well versed in the subject matter and believe their book is a great source of information. However, it seems unethical to me because they are requiring typically hundreds of students to purchase their own book, making the professor extra money. In addition, many teachers use the source as the sole method to teach a course that I believe clearly requires more sources of information. Moreover, it makes students a lot more hesitant to question or criticize the material they are reading for fear it will harm the professor's view of them. I'm experiencing this right now and would love to know why I'm wrong and change my view. And one edit, OP says, just to be clear, I am speaking about more than textbooks. Many professors who have written academic articles and books will still give them to their students, even if they are not considered textbooks. So it looks like right off the bat here, DeltaBot lets us know that the OP has awarded 1 Delta. And it is after one back and forth off the top comment from JFP Bookworm. So how's everything on your end there, Cal?
Yep. So I think you have the email address of the next OP, but yes, I'll read out this comment. So JFP Bookworm says that may hold true for Professor Bob from Podunk University, but what about professors who wrote the preeminent textbooks in their fields? It would do a disservice to students if, for example, Andy Van Dam or Marvin Chiralstein didn't use their books. Apologies. So So OP says, I totally agree with that point and didn't consider it before. But the majority of the professors are those professors who have written quality, but not necessarily influential works. Blackheart follows with two things to consider with this statement. Firstly, if suddenly influential.
Blackheart, former guest on the podcast.
Sorry.
I was saying Blackheart here is moderator and former guest on this same podcast.
Yes, and I believe. Yeah, so I'll start again. Firstly, if suddenly influence negates the ethics of having students get your own book, what's the threshold you're allowing here? Influential ideas often come from multiple places at once. They call it Darwin's theory of natural selection these days, but at the time, Alfred Russel Wallace independently was doing his own work, which came to the same conclusions. At which point, it was mostly name recognition and politics which decided that history would remember Darwin, not Wallace, as its inventor. Similar situations can be found all across the history of science and mathematics. Much like in any formal industry, academia has its famous all-stars who get to take the credit for the work done by so many others that culminated in their own seminal papers and overshadow the small thinkers who were just as qualified. Secondly, any professor who is teaching a subject is inherently going to be teaching with their own biases. It's human nature. You cannot escape the influence of your own perspectives because, well, you are you and can only be you. You can't be someone else. Everything you see is interpreted through your own biases. So even if the professor is using other materials as reference, in the lecture hall, they're going to be interpreting that work and disseminating it to their students from their own perspective. What's the difference, therefore, in having them do this in person with the occasional reference to their other works or in their book with a bibliography of citations? So OP says, I concede to your point about teaching with a bias. That is something I actually had not thought about until you brought it up. That still does not address the issue, though, of students feeling as if they have to agree with the teacher's points, when I believe that much of what makes college great is ability to think differently. Again, not talking about an academic textbook, but let's say you're taking a class on GMOs and your only reading material is a book that your professor wrote. It is tough to really be able to write negatively about what you know your grader has written, even if you believe it. So my own words now. I do find this interesting. I believe I heard in another podcast recently the idea that sometimes when you're at the top of your game or you're in a field where you are highly respected and are considered the well of knowledge on your area, it can be hard to accept new information after a long time of teaching certain information, because naturally we all have egos and we naturally attach those egos to the things we do. So there has been concern in the past of when it comes to new theories, older professors who have been teaching their theories for potentially, multiple decades can have difficulty accepting the new information because to some extent they feel, if by accepting that new information, depending on how significant it is, they might feel like they've wasted years of their life. So rather than accepting it,
tied up in it. You've been researching if you're the expert, and what's the old saying? If you stay in academia, you start learning more and more about less and less until you know everything about nothing. So you keep getting a narrower and narrower expertise area. So yeah, someone has to be the expert on I don't know, designing soda bottle caps. And if their whole career they always believed the screw pattern was the best way to attach a soda, and then someday suddenly Arrowhead Water just came out a week ago with this pop top cap. Like whoever designed that screw cap is going to be against that.
Yeah.
It's just they're I don't know how you get around that without not hiring humans. Yeah. But I guess
Yeah,
the
yeah, it's
side
interesting.
your, your work destroyed in a sense, or you found out the thing you've been arguing for 30 years is no longer the paradigm that works. You know the Kuhnian cycle has moved on to someone else. You can at least take heart in knowing you've covered an area that we can now eliminate. Like we know it's not this, and most of science is that, really, isn't most of it kind of eliminating stuff that isn't the thing.
Yeah. Although I can totally appreciate, like, if it was as extreme as your theory being completely thrown out, that teaching it for your entire lifetime and then at the end finding out that none of it was true, obviously it probably is never as simple as none of it being true. And
Yeah.
your teaching has probably still been incredibly valuable, even in the sense that you've helped people open their minds and explore whatever area you're working in. So I can almost certainly say there will never have been a case where someone has essentially wasted their time. But I can imagine it being a hard pill to swallow.
One, it could maybe Mendelian genetics, like the idea that it was not. It did end up being like natural selection was a fully different model, I think, versus like things having kind of this impetus to want to change within a lifespan rather than over generations.
Mm.
I'm forgetting some of the details, but yes, I think you're right that 90% of the time there will still be lots of useful stuff in their work, and that perhaps it was just that top level paradigm that popped.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So I guess to tie that back in, basically what we were saying is, I guess that was what I was saying there is an agreement to some extent with the OP in that teaching exclusively from their own writings, if I guess if it's found out to be untrue, then that could be an issue. But it seems the OP was satisfied. Another comment that seems to have changed their opinion to some extent was from a user called Piano Concerto Number 2, who says that I'm married to a professor, and I'll just say they don't go through years of working their butts off, finishing a PhD, writing their dissertation / sitting through a defense of it, then spending years of teaching / writing a textbook or going through peer review just to break down once an undergrad challenges it. I know one of the reasons they provide their own material is because it's cheaper to alternatives. I had a professor who did that. His book was $30 to $40. The alternative book was a few hundred. So yeah, that's a very good point. And OP or the Delta saying, "Wow, I never considered that it would actually be cheaper for them to use their own materials than others." So yeah, I mean it's a good point, isn't it? You kind of assume from the way that this view is laid out that it was egotistical decision to teach from their own writings, when in actual fact it could be to help out the students, because personally I know textbooks are expensive, and if the lecturer or professor is recommending a cheaper version that does the same thing, then that's great.
yeah. And another thing too is that like any professor who's teaching any topic is going to teach what they think is the right thing to teach, right? That's a given. Like
Yeah,
they're going to teach what they think is correct. So what they think is correct is going to be the sum of their research and work as a professor, but what they're writing and what they're generating. But what they're generating, what they're writing, is going to be a reflection of what they think. So if they're going to teach what they think and their writing is what they think, and those are the same things, you'd almost have to go like out of your way not to include some of your own writings. Do the work of summarizing what you're trying to do, what you think is the right answer, right?
yeah.
Like I don't know how you get around that. Like,
It,
yeah, you think all this stuff is right, you put it in your book, but no, we're not going to go with what you think. But pick 5 other authors that are close to you, but not what you actually think. I don't know. That seems awkward because he's going to know his own work or her own work very well.
mm-hmm. Yeah, it kind of reminds me of people who criticize vegetarian adults for raising their children vegetarian for, like, you know, the reason that they should make that decision themselves, which is a fair decision because, you know, just as a bit of information, I was raised a vegetarian and now I'm not a vegetarian. So
And how good was that first steak?
yeah, good. So I kind of see this point because you know, looking back, I don't want to get too into it. I know it's a bit of a touchy subject for some people, but it's the relevance was that how can a parent who thinks meat is murder let sit by and watch their child eat meat? I mean, I guess it would be tough.
Yeah, especially if it's overcooked. No, I agree. You can't a parent to I don't know if they're against ice cubes, like, oh, but let your children decide on whether they're gonna have ice in their, like, you're asking someone to like do what they think is wrong, right?
Yeah.
So and then that gets an awkward space of, you know, the power of the state with vaccines and schools and all that. So that's a but essentially at the end we're talking about experts referencing their own stuff, and I don't know, their own stuff's going to be based on what they think. So if anything, I'm surprised we don't see more of it. But to go back to the opinion changing thing, I think you take someone with a career like Steven Pinker is kind of the way he writes is in a position where I think he could walk almost anything back that he's gotten to with all his conclusions because he's just so thorough with his research and such a good writer that I think he could, like, in a healthy way, re-encapsulate his paradigm with, oh, I found out this and I was wrong there, and here's why it's funny, and like maybe it's something to do with the training we give professors. Are those just hard life lessons they learn, or are there classes on how to build your own paradigm and how to overcome your own personal whims to accept new data? Like I don't know if that's a thing, but
Yeah. So how are we getting on with? I believe I sent you the email address of another OP.
yeah. So I sent the invite, and so just for those listening, we have someone who wants to come in live. I've sent an invite out to that person who's I think a live OP. Is that right, Cal?
Yes. Well, no, not live. Actually, I
But,
think. Let me double check. The post was.
oh, it was from this week,
Yes, from 4 days ago.
4 days ago. Okay. So did they ever get back to you to say if they got the invite?
So I've just told them that the invite was sent. So hopefully they can
Okay,
join us.
great. Okay, so while we're waiting on that piece, we could jump into the fun one. They represent the only remaining serious post, right?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yeah. So we can go into a lighthearted one if you like.
Go into some of the fun ones here. Um, so what we like to do every week is look back through the top posts of the week and scroll down for things that seem to have a less heavy, more lighthearted type of topic here. So I'm just gonna go with the this first one here is great. Okay, change my view. This is from Reddit username Zilfer ZLYPHER. 3 days ago, 851 upvotes. Very strong thread, 63 comments on this following controversial topic. Change my view. Boneless chicken wings are just chicken tenders. Boneless chicken wings are just better, first of all. But any immediate feelings on this, strong one way or another, Cal? As a former vegetarian, now carnivore.
You know, I have no opinions on this whatsoever. To be honest, I don't know if I've ever thought about it. So,
All right, well, here, let's read OP's passionate summary. OP says, I can't help but feel that boneless wings are actually just chicken tenders for a variety of reasons. First of all, boneless wings seem to have the consistency of tenders, utilizing full strips of chicken rather than the slurry that you find with nuggets. It's like, by the way, I like the distinction between tenders and nuggets because I would have actually thought that tenders was just his word for nuggets, but good distinction. A tender is the solid block of meat. The nugget is made of the processed, like ground up, the McDonald's chicken nugget substance, I guess. I don't know. They're delicious though. whatever you call it. Secondly, the general size and shape of boneless wings tend to be more tender shaped, in my opinion, opposed to the shape of the standard chicken nugget. Lastly, I feel as if the breading alone on boneless wings allows them to be classified as a tender, as boneless wings tend to have much more batter breading than the standard nugget. People I know have been adamant in believing that boneless wings are not indeed tenders. At this point, I am beginning to wonder if I'm incorrect, or in my judgment, are boneless wings just tenders, or am I closed-minded? I got to agree with OP here. I think they're just synonyms, and I think it's a funny insight. What do you think?
Yeah. No, I agree.
But we have a strong responder, though. And this is a short, but this is almost a low-effort link, though. Oh no.
I think it's acceptable.
Response, top.
Well, yes, I guess they're
Okay.
listening to another argument, but
I think top replied thing here from S. Kazarowski says chicken tenders are an actual part of the anatomy. Those letters are all in blue because it's a link to thekitchen.com. What the heck is a chicken tender? Meat basics. So apparently it's part of the chicken anatomy. It's a specific part of the bird. Zilver says Delta makes complete sense. Boneless wings are definitely a league of their own. Opposed to tenders and nuggets. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. Ha! That's an all-star OP right there. I appreciate that. That was their words. Winner and chicken dinner. Yeah. This reminds me. I have an ongoing argument with my friends from college, and the group's split right down the middle really effectively. This goes back 15 years, but if tell me your opinion on this, Cal. If you take a French fry and you break it in half, do you have fry or fries? And I guess you would call it a chip. If you take right.
Well, we actually have fries, and they are different to chips. But good question. You have one fry, snap it in half. Well, I would still call it a fry that's been cut in half because it was fried as one.
Okay.
And
the full sealing of a fry is what defines it. If there's an exposed part of unfried potato mass, then that gives a signal that it's not a true and wholly formed fry, but it's missing a part that prevents it from being a whole. Is that?
Well, yeah, because I have a guitar sitting nearby. If I was to smash it right now and the neck came apart, I would still have one guitar instead. Well, not really, but it wouldn't be two guitars.
Yeah, I mean, I think you don't get into like not more fries until the length of the fry becomes shorter than the thickness. I think at that point you're just dealing with like weird potato chunks. But I do think you get multiple fries because if I handed you one of those and you didn't know it came from somewhere else, you'd be like, "Oh, thanks for the French fry," you know?
Yeah, and I've just realized, my argument's completely flawed because actually, if you snap the fry in half, you could still eat them individually as if they were two fries. Whereas if I snapped my guitar in half, I couldn't play either half of it, and they wouldn't, it's not a guitar anymore.
It serves functional purposes.
Mm.
Okay. Yeah.
I think I've just changed my own view.
Hey.
Yeah, I think it's two fries if you snap a fry in half.
Oh, this is fantastic! I'm so showing this to my college friends. This is a win. The Whistler crew. Ha! Look, I just recruited another one. Okay, so you want to jump into the next silly topic here?
Yeah, sure.
Any update from our guest?
No, I don't believe so, but hopefully we can still fit that in.
All right, so next, you want to go with the font or the keyboard?
Well, I don't have it in front of me just now, so perhaps you should.
Okay, here, I'll just go into the first one here. Change my view, Times New Roman is an ugly font and shouldn't be the standard for academic writings. See, we're having a very academic theme today. Wikipedia, on or off 20 men, ONOROFF20MEN. 5 days ago, 155 upvotes. Says, I don't know how other schools, universities do it, but my university always requires Times New Roman when submitting essays. This, I think, is limiting to frankly absurd. is limiting and frankly absurd to use this font in particular. My grievances come in two main points. Ah, yes, grievances. That's fantastic. Number one, Times New Roman is very thin and small, making it difficult to read on a standard size 11 or 12 font. Two, Times New Roman is ugly, making mainly for the reasons stated above and longer sentences, the small blocky style of the font makes the text both boring and uninteresting. Large paragraphs, it gives the appearance that there is more text there than actually is compared to Helvetica or other fonts. I believe that everyone would be better off if we were open to other fonts. Top reply here is from TB Dab Home. Actually, do you have anything to throw in yet, Cal, before I go into top reply?
Well, not really, apart from I've always found this whole font thing really interesting. I'm kind of font blind in a way, in the sense that unless it's something really bad like Comic Sans, I generally don't appreciate the differences between the generally accepted ones. And when it came to writing my thesis at university, I tried a few different fonts, and I honestly just like, I don't know which one to use. But people seem to be quite heated on this sometimes. They're really opinionated. So
totally. Yeah, I don't have a strong opinion either way. I like Verdana. It's crisp. I mean, if I'm designing a T-shirt, I might spend a while on the font. Like I had a custom shirt made that said like, "Please, I have a family," just in case I'm kidnapped and put duct tape on the mouth, I could still bleed. And I ended up going with more of like a something more like a Comic Sans because it implied sort of the children aspect of it. But I had another one, Irregardless, and I did it in more of a stylized, something you'd see on a snowboard kind of style, but a little sharper. Just the shirt just said Irregardless, which is maybe my favorite shirt ever. But other than those situations, I think for block text, I don't know. I mean, any of the common Arial, Verdana, Times New Roman, they all seem fine to me. Yeah, so shrugs all around.
I mean, I remember Reddit actually changed their font. I think it was a couple of years ago, or maybe they just increased the font size or something like that. And I remember at the time it was very controversial. People were up in arms. I think we've got used to it now.
Yeah, I think it's good that there are experts out there that have a passion for this. I just don't think it's me.
So
they're covering it, makes it much more than great.
Yeah.
I do have a coming up in about 10 minutes. So just to let you know, we're probably going to need to try and squeeze in what we can unless I've got the control of the session here on my end. So sorry to just drop that on you, but I just saw it. Something I was expecting to happen a little later just popped up. So
okay, no worries. Well, I mean, if by some miracle this OP drops in the next couple of minutes, perhaps we could get a quick recap. I don't know. What do you want to do? I mean,
yeah, let's give them a little time, and we've got enough here to fill. But
maybe we could start talking about their post.
Okay, how about that? Yeah. And which was their post?
So let me just get it up. Okay, I clicked off it. Right, let me. Sorry.
Okay, I'm just going to go into one of the other last lighthearted ones just for fun here while you're looking at that.
Yep.
Here and maybe our users can tell us what they think about this. But the position here at 197 upvotes change my view to position of Windows control is superior to Mac OS X's command button. First off, the command button has the word command and like this asterisk with rounded corners. And it's also been called the Apple button. The button's got three names. Like, for one thing, Apple, get your stuff together. Like, just pick one, declare it for all time. That is the thing. Is it a command button? Is it the squiggle symbol button? Like, what is it? And is that a hashtag that is indecisive? Is that what that symbol means? I have so many problems with that button. But you know, the positioning, I think it just depends on like what's comfortable with your fingers, right? Command and control.
So
So
just to jump in here, the OP has
oh, go
said
ahead.
that he clicked on the link, but he doesn't know if you can tell. So I think he's tried to join our chat right now.
Okay, so I don't see.
And while you're doing that, I can read through the post. So let me find it. Okay, so the OP we're trying to get in here just for, you know, we thought it would be good to have try whenever we can some community involvement in this podcast and hear their perspectives, if only for a change of voice for the listeners as well as you know, some different perspectives. So this one is a post by user but zebras can't smell, and the post is titled CMV. It is rarely appropriate and almost never helpful to comment on someone's physical appearance, whether the comment is positive or negative. And they go on to say, most obvious example of these comments are about weight loss, where multiple studies have shown that people told they're overweight versus saying nothing or having them invited to healthy activities without comments experience a more difficult time losing weight and maintaining weight loss. It's hypothesized that this trend stems from the fact that overeating is often a way to deal with anxiety, and having undesirable weight pointed out increases anxiety. We say, I just want you to be healthy, and they hear, I'm looking at you and judging your body. So, and commenting in a positive way about weight loss or gain has been shown to reinforce the mindset of people suffering from eating disorders. We say, looking great, and they hear, you looked terrible before, and everyone thinks so. Positive comments have been identified as a catalyst for dangerous behaviors when the weight loss was not intentional, like in cases of illness-related drops. Cases where someone lost weight unintentionally, but then feel pressure to maintain the unnatural loss because of the way people reacted. Commenting on weight loss/gain has been shown to make people feel watched and anxious, and when they feel that way, they're more likely to engage in unhealthy behaviors in order to cope. This applies to comments about body types and shapes in general. At best, it's unnecessary, and at worst, it's harmful. I do think there are exceptions for positive comments about cosmetic choices, i.e., I love that haircut, or that color really brings out your eyes. And also for negative comments that can be immediately remedied, i.e., you have spinach in your teeth, i.e., you have spinach in your teeth. But in most cases, the potential upside of complimenting/disparaging someone's physical appearance is far outweighed by the potential damage. Interesting. Any luck with getting the OP here, Michael?
Yeah, I did send an email again. I don't know if this sometimes maybe some delay with Google or something. It's hard to tell. But there was a top comment here at the very top that you know, it was kind of a, if anything, regardless of what side you'd end up falling on this issue, kind of just a nice little moment in the CMB here. But the top voted response to OP was by Bert the Monkey, who says as follows: 4 point votes. I recently lost a lot of weight, yet I still feel like I was fat. Some people call it phantom fat. I was healthier, yet I felt no reward. Then some girl said, I look great yesterday, and flirted with me. First time that ever happened to me ever. Didn't go anywhere, but it did make me feel like $1,000,000. Maybe it wasn't productive. Maybe it will make me likely gain weight in the future. But let me tell you, it made me feel like I wasn't disgusting and worthless, like I actually have value. And that alone made those painful weight loss months of patience and steadfastness worth it. Kind of sweet, you know. It's it's a direct example of countering OP too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
But,
unfortunately, I'm not sure we're gonna have the OP with us this time.
but what we can do is keep the door open if they want to come back next week, and we can
Maybe pick it up where we
maybe
left
come
off.
back around on this now. That yeah, we can sort of we'll leave the description here as is with that first comment read, and then come back around next week to maybe finish the story. How about that?
A cliffhanger.
Exactly. Cliffhangers are awesome. All right. Well, we've got through some of the light posts, the heavy posts. If you have opinions on anything there, always love to hear them. Love to get your feedback in the sticky comment. But one thing you wanted to add, you had a new feature of something you wanted to ask the audience, right, Cal? As far as the episodes?
Yeah. At this point, at this level of engagement, it might not be something that happens, but generally in the future, I would really like to have a section at the end where we ask people to suggest titles for the episode, because as you may know, the first 8 episodes, I believe, were pre-recorded and edited, so we were able to, make titles for the episodes. But these last few have been live streams, and so the titles have just been our usernames on Reddit. But after a few of those, it will get a bit repetitive. So maybe it would be good to have a section at the end where we say, name this episode for us, and we can edit it and upload it with that title. But for now, we'll just play it by ear and go with what we have.
Give your ideas, and for everyone listening now or listening later, thank you for tuning in. Anything else to add, Cal?
No, all good. Thank you.
Cool. All right. Well, there's our outro music.
Goodbye.
All right. Cool. Talk to you next week, man.
Bye.
This has been Change My View Podcast.